torn into two. Last week we studied a little bit about Solomon and the great wisdom that he had, because that's what he asked God for when God said you can have anything you want. Sorry to say, his sons were not near as wise as their father. Of course, Solomon had his issues too, so we don't want to make him out to be perfect in all that he did, but his kids, well, they really didn't show the same amount of wisdom that Dad had shown over his time in reigning over Israel. I want you to take a moment and turn to the person next to you or behind you or in front of you, and I want you to ask them this question. What is the last movie that you have seen that had an impact on your life? Ooh. Well, some of you go like, I don't watch movies. Well, then you can just sit there and soak it in, I guess. I'm not sure. But the last movie that had an impact on your life. I mean, I guess it could even be, whether you saw it on TV or Netflix or at the theater or wherever. Last movie that made an impact on your life. All right. This is not rhetorical. You can answer out loud if you have one that just made a huge impact, right?
Lone Survivor.
Lone Survivor. Okay. Okay. What was it about the movie that made such an impact on you?
I don't know. It was that SEAL team that went to Afghanistan.
Yes.
And they all died except for the one, and it just shows you how hard they worked and how much they protect us. We just need to appreciate it.
Okay. So the lesson that you learned was that we need to appreciate those people that serve in the military and also their sacrifice. Okay? Good. Somebody else? Go ahead.
There's a movie that will be coming out called Unbroken. I read the book. I haven't seen the movie because it's not out yet, but I would highly recommend it when it does come out.
Unbroken?
Or read the book.
Okay. Okay, what was it about that?
It's about forgiveness.
About forgiveness. Okay. Saving Private Ryan. What was it, Nancy?
Well, that was World War II.
Right.
Which I lived through, but we didn't know how bad it was because we only had movie-tone news once a week.
Okay.
And it was horrible, and we have to be so grateful to those men who did do that.
Okay. So another opportunity for us to see and express gratitude to those who serve. I have to admit, one of the movies that kind of hit with me when I was thinking about this was the movie The Bucket List. And I liked it because it, first of all, it reminded me of a high school English assignment I had where my teacher wanted us to make a bucket list. They didn't call it that at that time. What are the top 10 things you want to do during your lifetime? But there was something about that movie, it's like, all right, why am I waiting to the very end to do some of these things? Because I don't know about you, but the older I get, the slower I get. And the older I get, the tougher it is to do some of those things. Now, I will say that one of the things on my bucket list was to skydive. But anyone who knows me knows that I'm scared to death of heights. So it's like, I haven't figured out how that one's going to happen yet. Yeah, really, you didn't even know that one. They're going to have to push me out the plane, I guess. I hope somebody's got a video camera there. But there were just some certain things about that movie that just really resonated with me, in that there were things that these men wanted to do, and maybe it was financial, the reason why they couldn't do it. Maybe it was just the time. Maybe it was just issues of commitments that they had made, and they both realized how much they gained by going through and fulfilling some of their dreams that they had had on their list. Well, the thing about movies for us is that there are different parts of the movie, different components to each movie, no matter what the movie is about, whether it's a kids movie that's made by VeggieTales or Disney, or whether or not it's something really heavy, like some of you have mentioned, some real dramatic movies. You've got the setting, the characters, the perspective or the point of view, the plot, and that's always got some sort of conflict going on in it. You've got the resolution, and then a theme. Well, I want us to be able to take those characteristics and take a look at the passage today and try to figure out where this fits in and what a difference and how that can impact our lives and impact our stories. Now, if I had mentioned the movie to you, the Shawshank Redemption, most people would say, well, the theme for that movie is right there in the title. It's redemption. And as we look at this passage, hopefully you'll be able to see some of those things and be able to go, oh yeah, I just get the scene, I get the plot, I understand the underlying story that's involved, and so forth. But let's set it up. Let's take a look at the setting. 1 Kings chapter 12, we looked at it just a little bit earlier. Solomon's heart was divided. Solomon was really struggling. He knew that, he had great wisdom in dealing with his people, but he had a couple kids that were not exactly following in his path. And he should understand that. He saw that with his grandfather. He saw that also with David and the struggles that David had with King Saul. But there was something else about the setting, and that was the fact that Solomon took that great gift from God in wisdom, and he, I'm not sure I would even say misused, but he just kind of turned it on its ear and treated the people of Israel not as a wise king, but as someone who was trying to get a little bit more than what he already had. He was oppressive to many of the people. And I don't know if that comes from being in a position of leadership, or whether or not he was just succumbing to some of the situations around him with other countries and saying, why aren't you doing this with your people? Why aren't you taxing them more? Why aren't you making them work harder? And so forth. Maybe we could turn Solomon or his story loose in Des Moines or in D.C., but that's for another day. Solomon, the setting continues on where Solomon dies, and his son has already started the takeover of the government with Rehoboam. You've got the characters in the story of Rehoboam, Solomon's son, the tribe of Judah, and a son, Jeroboam, who was from a different tribe, the tribe of Ephraim. And in 1 Kings 11, the prophet told Jeroboam that he will become the king. And unlike, you remember the story of David, where David was anointed to be the next king, he didn't push it. He was a kid at the time, and he didn't push it. He didn't try to accelerate God's timeline. We saw that with Joseph, where he had the dream that his brothers would bow down to him, and it took over 30 years from the time that he had the dream and spurted it out to the time where it actually came to fruition. So Solomon's son did the same thing. Did the opposite of what Joseph did and what David did, and tried to accelerate his push into power. 1 Kings chapter 11, the prophet tells Jeroboam that he'll become king, but you must wait. Tell somebody that something great will happen to you, but you must wait. I don't know about you, but last time I looked, wait was a 4-letter word. And for many of us, that's exactly the way it was perceived by Solomon's son. He refused to wait, and he rebels against his father Solomon. Now, from a perspective point of view, there's an upper part to this story. We know what God had intended for His children. We know that God had provided good leadership that had done some very positive things. King David, and then had blown it on a couple of occasions, and then came back to God and was reconnected with God through asking for forgiveness and admitting the fact that he just had blown it in his job and in his role as king. And then to see Solomon. And so there's an upper part to this whole story. God continues to bring people in that will guide us, lead His people to a point of getting reunited, getting closer to God. The problem is that there's always a subplot. There's always the lower story that we never quite seem to go right to what the main part of the story is. We never seem to go exactly where we need to. We always, try to circumvent God in trying to get what we're going to get and to do what God wants us to do. That those daily details sometimes get in the way. You and I may buy into God's big plan. God's plan for the universe, God's plan for our lives. I know the adult Sunday school class is getting into areas of the end times, and to be able to see what God has in store for His people. The problem is a lot of times we want to rush it. We want to push the timeline. And God is trying to tell us, you've got to do this in my time. Don't get to the point where you think that you've got to accelerate what I want, because there's a lot of other things going on other than just you. So God is teaching us in teaching His children Israel, and also teaching us through that bigger story. Now, there's a conflict. And we see the conflict going on, and it's between the people and it's between the king. Solomon had told his people, he had been demanding certain things, trying to get the people to do more, pay more in taxes, work harder on behalf of the country. And they were starting to rebel. And so when Solomon died and his son came into power, they came to his son and they said, now, your father did this, would you lighten up a little bit? In essence is what they said. And so the new king went aside and took Solomon's advisors and said, what do you think I should do? He says, they're probably going to serve you, be more respectful of you, honor you as their leader if you back off a little bit. Okay? So then he goes to his advisors, the younger ones. Now, please don't get me wrong. It's not that older and younger, I think part of it is the fact that the older ones knew the history, and the younger ones were going like, hey, now it's our turn. We're in charge. And so these people, the younger advisors, saying, man, you ought to just hammer them even more. Well, the king decided to take the younger advisor's response and went back to the people and said, "You think my dad was tough? Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet." And he tried to, or he showed them that he was going to be tougher on the people than what his father was. It created such an uproar in the country that the country split. It got so bad that the country decided, some of the people in the country decided, fine, you want to come out and make us do more, send your best guy out. Send your advisor out. You bring them out. And what happened? People killed him. It kind of reminded me of the story of the owner of the vineyard that Jesus told in the gospel text, where send in the head of the vineyard, and they killed him, and then send in his son, and the people in the vineyard said, well, you know what, if we kill the son, then maybe we'll get claim to the vineyard. This is all this internal struggle, and it's actually the lower part of the story that we're seeing. The resolution comes in a couple different ways. Obviously, the people revolt, and God actually steps in and divides the country into two nations. The upper kingdom and the lower kingdom. The upper kingdom being one that was going to be ruled by a godless leader. And then God using Solomon's next son to be able to guide the southern kingdom. The themes are all over the place in this, aren't they? The upper story theme that God has a plan to get us back. God wants to bring us back to relationship with Himself. We saw this in week 1. God wants to make it special for us. The lower story, our decisions can cause a ripple effect in not only our lives, but in everybody else's life. We talked about that. We talked about that over the last few weeks. That God is trying to let us know that every decision that we make can have an influence, positively or negatively, on somebody else. You make a wise decision, it can positively impact your family, your neighbors, your community, your church, your world. But you go in and make a decision that is selfish, that is lacking caring for other people, you may get what you want, but there will be consequences that are going to be paid. And we like the idea of getting what we want, but we shouldn't like the idea of having it affect everybody around us on a negative basis. Solomon's sons realized that, and their decisions, Solomon's decisions, affected them, and their decisions continue to affect the children of God. So where do we go? What's the application? How do we see what's going on? Where does this part of God's story fit our story? Make those decisions. Those decisions can impact positively or negatively. And we need to realize that. Everything we do can have the possibility of impacting someone else. And it may be for the good, it may be for the bad. You try to push God's timing, and you're going to end up in trouble. And we saw that with Rehoboam. Our challenge is to consider every decision that we make. What may appear to be a good decision, expanding our business, buying more land, being able to get new equipment, being able to do things that appear on the surface to be very positive, yet can have negative consequences for our family and for our finances, and also for those around us. So we need to be careful about that. And think of it in terms of generations. One of the passages that we read talked about the genealogy. Think about what it's going to be like. You make a decision. Is that going to be the decision that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to remember about you? I don't know about you, but that gets me to stop for a minute. That gets me to pause just long enough to sit there and go like, all right, how is this going to affect my family generations down the road? Oh, Rich, you're trying to read too much into it. Well, not really. Decisions that we have made have been very positive. Who would have thought the decision that Mimi and I made to come to Sloan, who would have thought that the decision that the search committee made to call us to come to Sloan would have affected my children and my grandchildren? It's Sloan. It's 1,000 people. It's not going to affect us for generations. Au contraire. Both of our sons found the loves of their lives here in Sloan. We have grandchildren because of those relationships that were formed here in Sloan. Now, if you would have asked us in the winter of 95 and early of 1996 whether or not it was going to have an impact on our children and grandchildren, we're going like, well, the kids are going to have to move school. That's about it. I don't see any big deal. And now we look back and we are able to see that. And we can see that there was a bigger story than just our packing up and moving to Sloan. Now, it'll be kind of interesting to see as the grandkids get older, what their response will be when they ask, Papa, why did you and Anna move to Sloan? And watch the reaction as we start to tell the story step by step and the effects that that decision had even on their lives. Yeah? Those decisions that we make will affect us and the people around us. God has a plan for us. And God knows how that plan will affect generations to come. It will not only affect people now, but it will affect generations to come. And God knows how it's going to work. We don't. So if we trust God, it's going to have a different attitude than if we just rely on ourselves to make those decisions. Where you go to school, what type of job you have, how is that going to influence everything that we do? Now that's going to either do one of two things for you. One, it's going to make you really excited, or one, it's going to scare the living daylights out of you. And maybe the healthy part of that is does a little bit of both. We need to continue to realize that our story is not just our story unconnected to everything else. Our lives connect with everyone else that we come in contact with every day. And our story is part of God's story. Part of a bigger story yet. I doubt if Jeroboam and Rehoboam sat down and figured out, well, you know what? Somewhere in another country, in 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years after us, people are going to be talking about us. Are you ready to allow the decisions that you make to be talked about 4,000 years from now? They can. They may affect generations to come. And you and I need to take those decisions seriously. And realize that our story is connected with God's story and with everyone else that we see. And if that's the case, you and I need to bathe every day and every decision we make in prayer, to make sure that we realize the difference that that can make. What you do can affect these little ones that are here. What you do today can affect them for a lifetime. You treat them with love and compassion, they're going to begin to learn that the church is a place that they are loved and appreciated and that they want to be a part of the rest of their lives. Or if we just shoo them off, they're going to say, yeah, I was in church one time and they treated my mom bad and they treated me bad and they treated my dad bad, and so I'm never going back to church again. Just what we do today could have that influence on the lives of our children. My desire for this church, and I believe God's desire for this church, is not to see God's kingdom torn into two. Not to see us divided, but to see us united and loving and compassionate to each other and to them. Because that will pay rewards for years to come. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you